5:32.
Okay.
You
So
brought it
we have
out
to
for
call this
today.
meeting to order.
We got like a whole shebang.
These are like visitors.
No, these
Oh,
are
they're
audience members.
Oh, you guys
here.
just want to
Distinguished guests.
visit us?
I know, this
Wow.
is the most fun
These are
committee
No, I'm like,
we
no,
have
we're
right
never
now.
coming here. Thanks, Robin.
Distinguished
So-
guests.
So we shall not disappoint.
Hey Kathy, I made you a printed book if that would be helpful, rather than having to go on your computer.
Yes.
You did?
I did.
How nice is that?
You special.
I feel very special.
Oh, no, I'm like.
See what you can get, what, rate if you change.
Yeah, tell me about
This is all- what is all
it.
this?
So it's the agenda for the finance committee, it's just the finance committee portion of it,
And all their attachments.
and the attachments.
And all the
Seriously?
many attachments.
Wow.
First of all, we
So-
got 89 districts, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now I know why there's so
Yeah,
many.
Yes.
so many. So do you
Okay.
want to go ahead and call us to
Yes,
order,
call
and
the
we'll get
meeting to
started?
order, and I'm gonna, or should I do a roll call, or?
Sure.
Okay, I'm here, Laura, Kendall,
Here.
Rich Gimmel,
Here,
and Hal is not here. He has to go to the other meeting.
Okay.
He's acting as quorum for operations.
Oh, okay,
Because they're missing members of their committee.
okay.
So where, I'm sorry, is this our, agenda? Did you put an agenda in here? I mean, here
Well,
we
the-
go.
yeah.
Okay, so, do you wanna just talk about all of this, Robin? or do
Yeah,
you-
well, I think we can go pretty quickly through
Okay.
several of these.
Okay.
We want to spend a few minutes at the end, if we can, to give you a little more detail on the ABR discussion that we were having. That seems to be a little newer topic. These other ones, I think you have seen before in other meetings. The first is approval of new district facility plans. And I'm not gonna read all the names that there are. There are actually 22. And, you know, typically we have 5 or 6 district facility plans that come before the committee at any board meeting. The reason that we have so many right now is they are preparing for the end of the fiscal year and the next biennial budget. So what they're trying to do is making sure their district facility plans are up to date, which then updates the numbers of their unmet need. And so that has the most current information on their need, and that helps them as we roll forward for the budget session. So that's why you see so many. We'll also, for the August meeting, probably have a similar number, great big stack of them. The good news, at least for these that we have in front of us today, they're pretty routine in that public comment, they follow the process. Remember, this is the piece that we make sure that they're following the appropriate process so that there is adequate public input and notice. The DFPs, of course, are like a strategic planning document. It's what they would like to do. It doesn't commit funds or anything like that. So it's just, it informs the public what they're trying to accomplish in the world of facilities and allows the public to make comment. So all of these that is before the Finance Committee today have acted appropriately with their advertising and meeting the requirements of the public hearing and soliciting that input. I think there was very little public input, more like a couple of questions that were answered across really
Maybe
all the
one or
districts.
two, yeah.
Yeah, so we're happy to answer any questions. We have staff from the facilities area if you have any questions on any of the facility plans specifically.
And just as part of the process too, one thing that we look at is that in each of these situations, the local planning committee and the board all voted, in fact, it's all unanimous in favor of these plans.
Okay.
So what you see by that is that the local communities are supportive of the plans that are being put forward.
How are we doing? Are we getting more traction on getting facilities information online from the?
Okay,
Yes.
we've been working it pretty hard. In fact, Greg, didn't you tell me, aren't there about 17 districts that we have one architect that is working pretty hard that thinks that, so that's, you know,
Not, right.
that's 10% of all the districts right there, so there's a big push coming in.
Push too. Once we get through this bulge in our workload with the DFPs, we're going to start looking at their information much more closely.
Yes,
I
yeah,
was just
so,
curious if they
yeah, I
were
think
coming
by,
along.
and I think by our August meeting, we'll have a much better, we will actually bring a report to this committee or one of the committees as appropriate, either in August or October, to kind of brief you all before we take the final report to the General Assembly. So you'll
I
know
think as
exactly
we've
where
been
it's
out in the
at.
schools, we've all kind of.
Yeah, that's great,
encouraging.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
They all have the same attitude.
Yeah, yeah, we
I'm like,
wanna
but
do
once
that.
you get it done, though, it's done.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it's come-
Appreciate that
come
very
hurdle.
much.
So our role here is only to make sure they follow process, not to evaluate the efficacy of their,
Mhm.
No.
Plan.
you know, because like, for example, I've gotten feedback about Somerset, who just apparently spent a whole bunch of money on some athletic stuff.
Mhm.
But the results with their kids is not so great.
Mhm.
So that, you know, there's heartburn there, but that's not the role
That's
of,
not the district facility.
that is up to them locally.
And especially like with athletics,
Mhm.
Kathy, the one thing our guys kind of hold the line on is that as long as they have general funds or, you know, cash,
Mhm.
they can do that, that's kind of on their plan, but, you know, we don't let them use like SFCC funding on that.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, it's hard with, especially athletics, you know, and I'll tell people all the time, I'm not, you know, a fan of athletics, I'm not a ball player, didn't get out rah, whatever. But you, especially these small communities, the athletics and the facilities are very important to that local community. That is what
They're
holds the
entertaining.
glue. So, you know, even though you think, oh, why are they spending money on that? Well, there is good reason. It's just maybe not to the instructional, but it is very important for the spirit of that community. So-
Yeah, okay.
But from your perspective, what our guys do is when districts start building the plans and they start working with them from the very beginning, when they're first starting to nominate their local planning committees, they're following along with the districts on their planning process and making sure they follow the planning manual that's incorporated in regulation. So in terms of the spaces that they have allocated, their prioritization, the process they followed. So it's not to try to make decisions on whether we think that was a good, you know, use of funds, as long as it's within the regulation and they follow the process to get there, then that's what we're opining to you, is that we have made sure they did this, and we're recommending to you approval of it, based
Okay.
on that.
So we can do that then, so,
That's the one thing. If you look at the structure provided in the reg for the district facility plans, there are 5 priorities. The first 2 have to do with educational facilities. You know, and 1 is for the current biennium and 2 is for the following biennium. 3 is for other associated spaces like cafeterias and that kind of thing. 4 is central offices. Everything in priorities 1 through 4 contributes to the district's capital construction need. However, athletic facilities, field houses, and all that other stuff is in priority 5. It's not eligible to use restricted funds. But that's a battle we fight every week.
Mhm. I'm sure they try.
Yeah.
so are these, are bonds being issued?
They, for the ones that have the priority 1s and 2s, at some point, if the district has enough bonding capacity, they may. But at this point, there are no funds that have been designated for use with these projects.
Yeah, so you're not making any decisions on funding with this approval.
Okay, this is
Right.
too early in the
As such, I will
process.
make a motion to approve those
I'll
district
second.
facility plans.
As recommended by staff.
And you second, did you say? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So is that just action item 1? All right, let's move on to 2.
So I think the next item on the agenda is the second reading to amend 702 KAR 3:130. This is to update procedures for Red Book, what we call Red Book.
Right.
And since our last presentation, you know, we already brought this before you once
Right.
before. We had the summary
Yes.
sheet that says all the changes. I think we had one minor technical correction that needed
Yeah,
to
we
be
did.
made. And so we have made that. Steve, do you want to speak to that just real quickly about that one change that was made, and we have informed LSAC of that. We've been in front of them again too.
Okay.
As well as our CASBO leadership as well.
That's
So
the-
it's the Kentucky Association of School Business Officials, so all the
Right.
finance officers in the state, so they've agreed to it as well. On page 7 of the revised Red Book,
Is that a summary?
yes,
It
it's
is
on
in
the
the
summary as
summary.
well.
Okay.
Yes, it's
the second
the
item down.
second item on the summary, talking about replacing a may to a shall. We had a workshop last week with our finance officers and auditors, and somebody made the comment that they found on page 7, where we talked about a place that, well, let me just look at it here. That,
Number 4.
yeah, where the bullets are, where funds shall or may stay in school activity funds. Well, a few years ago, we had an item where district activity funds were created. And we always intended for district activity funds and school activity funds to be separated. And so district activity funds allow schools to spend funds with a lot less restriction than the Red Book allows. And so, anyway, this word change needs to take effect. Because, anyway, I'm getting off flustered.
Now, you mentioned district versus school activity fund?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
here it says district versus student activity.
Right, exactly. District activity funds are board controlled. And so those are funds that are not collected through student or parent funds. So those are like more like fees and things like that,
Okay.
that are collected at the school level, but then they can be flowed back through.
Through the district.
Exactly, and throw back to the district. Now, school activity funds are those that are raised by students.
Boosters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and boosters and parents as well. And so what somebody mentioned to us last week is if that wording stays at a may stay in a school activity fund, then it's conceivable that a district may choose to not have any school activity funds. And that's not our intent at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we need that to be shall stay in school activity funds instead of may.
And I think everyone who has worked on the Red Book revisions all acknowledged
Oh,
that
yeah.
that was clearly
Oh, yeah.
the intention. This
Right.
was more of a technical drafting error than
And this
a
was all,
dispute over which way
Right.
it should be.
and this was new language that is located in Rich, not existing language. And had they not noticed that it said may instead of shall, that actually would have been a C change.
Really?
Yeah, so that was
Big
not.
consequences.
Yes,
Yeah.
it had big possible consequences, so that when we became aware of it in the meeting and knowing that it's not original language, we're going, holy smokes, well, at least we have an opportunity to get it
To fix
straightened out.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, you had some people going cha-ching, we don't
Uh-huh.
have the accounting
Right.
and the transparency requirements, if we can kind of, you know.
Push it over here.
Yeah, we would have to come back later and just basically just
rewrite
halt the
the
Red
law.
Book, halt the process and start all over again. And then it would have been several months later that we would have had to revise it, so.
One wrong.
So at least now we're able to catch it before the second reading, second approval and all that, so.
So that's
we
the
were-
only other change
Yeah,
that was
that was
made
it,
to
so.
it, so.
So
So this is the second reading that we're requesting, and of course, after you all do it, then we'll take it through the rest of the regulatory process, because we're seeking an amendment to the regulation that incorporates this by reference. So it'll go through the LRC review.
Okay.
and
That's the
public
only
hearing.
change from the first reading?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So should I just call for a vote then? Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve.
Move we approve.
A second.
And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, item 3, approval of indirect cost rates.
Yeah, so the next item on the agenda is to request the board's approval of school district indirect cost rates for fiscal year 1920. You know, the federal code provides that federal programs really bear a fair share of the administrative expenses when you operate a program. And so this is what this is trying to do, is calculate the rate by which school districts can, if they want to, charge an indirect cost rate for those administrative overhead. Those are those things, of course, that are not directly related necessarily with the program, but kind of across it, so it's more like administrative things. So each year, Chase Shop works with local school districts. They provide guidance to them on how to calculate their indirect costs. We actually have two indirect cost rates. We have a non-restricted rate, which is for our food service program, and then the grants are more the restricted rates. That's why you see two different columns. And they've all been submitted. Yeah, here we are. So, yeah, I don't know if people know, but the non-restricted rates, capital and maintenance is included, and in the restricted rate, it's not included. That's why you see the differences in the rates themselves. So all the districts have, according to our guidance, have submitted and calculated the rates, send it up to us, and that's what you see in front of us.
But they don't have to charge these rates.
Yeah, they don't have to charge
It's
it.
just if
So
they do this, it makes them make a
Our
charge.
board typically, is by the federal government, is required to approve these, and locally, we recommend that their board, even if they don't take them, approve these, but some don't take them, don't bother, and others will kind of religiously take them, so.
And so just so I'm clear, this would be to basically kind of take a fee for having provided whatever services are part of those funds they've received.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay,
To charge that expense to the grant.
got it. So they kind of
Right.
take their own money, goes into the district kitty,
Yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah.
for the management. Okay, that makes sense.
Do you have a question? No? Okay, so I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
So, all of this, item 4.
Okay, item 4 is the capital funds request. Okay, thank you. The last thing we have is to ask for approval of the capital fund request guidelines. We've talked about this before in the context that the General Assembly, through budget language, had allowed districts to be able to use capital outlay amounts toward operating costs. You know, we had a lot of districts that were just financially having problems meeting their operating costs. So they not withstood a statute in the budget bill and basically said, okay, for a period of time, you can actually tap into your capital outlay to pay for operating expenditures. Now, from a budget perspective, we don't like that very much, you
You're not
know?
kidding.
We don't like that at all. So for the fiscal year we're in right now, they could do that, but only up to 25% of their capital funds. So they could only use 25%
For how
of it
long? I mean, is it?
until the end of this
For the
fiscal year.
budget.
So
And then what
June
happens?
30th, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, July 1, they can't do that anymore. It reverts back to whatever they could use it for in the statute. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the things they can use it for by statute. They could
Right.
always do it that way, but the budget bill allowed them to use it for operating expenses.
Robin, are we gonna allow bonding for that? That they would typically bond for capital expenditures to use that for operating?
Well, they're
Could
just,
somebody find a way to do that?
For operating expenditures.
Mhm.
Now, the bonding that they have available to them is through the SFCC or
Yeah,
through the
so-
local nickel.
so
and
this
it's all
is just
facilities oriented.
monies that have come to them that were
Labeled.
formerly earmarked for capital outlay. The
Mhm.
budget bill said,
Okay.
you don't have to use it for that if you need it for operating, but only up to 25%.
Mhm.
So starting July 1st, they won't be able to do that anymore. They'll still be able to use it for these things, because that's in the statute,
Yeah.
but they can no longer use it for operating expenses. So what we're seeking your approval is, we have to now amend our guidelines to say you can't do that anymore.
25%.
And it's really not discretionary, because the budget bill says specifically you can't use it anymore.
Yeah.
So we're just
You're
aligning
aligning your
aligning
language.
our language in the guidelines with
With
this, the budget bill
statute.
language,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So that's all we're doing, this
I wonder, I wonder how, and that would be a total crapshoot, but how many districts are gonna struggle without access to?
Well, you know, for this, of course, was not the first biennium that we had it. You know, they
Right.
used to be able to do even more than the 25%. And I think we have tried really hard to let them know, we think this is going away.
Yeah.
You need to
So you need to
prepare.
be planning for it. So I think that
It's
was
a really
part.
bad idea to
Yeah.
have even, I
Yes.
think, done it at all.
Any idea how-
I would
how
say the
many
people that write the
districts-
law never win.
Any idea how many districts are doing this?
I knew he was gonna ask that, I meant to look that up before I came up here.
Just a
It's really
swag, I
gone
mean-
down.
It's
You know,
not all, You know, for example, we're talking to one district, they had never done one before. I'd say,
What it's tended to be, sometimes you'll see like electricity or property, or, you know, like other kinds of insurance.
Workers' comp.
Workers' comp is on there,
Those
pretty big
are the
ticket
kinds of
items.
things we were seeing. Several years ago, Rich, they were using it to pay salaries, and then we specifically adopted, said, no, you can't do that anymore.
Mhm.
So, whereas at one, the way that the statute reads is that if you use it for operating purposes, then you can't access SFCC funding, period. So they set aside that restriction, said you could use it without any limitations. And this was back probably 6 years or so ago, when the Great Recession was here.
Yeah.
And so they were really feeling the pain. So after that, the legislators have said, you know, that was okay, but we need to start cutting that spigot back. So through a lot of, you know, discussions with staff, they've really cut back. In fact, the ones that we're reviewing our year-end requests right now, and so I'm seeing fewer and fewer with operating expenses, the word's out.
No.
And then they were so limited in what they could do with it. I mean, it was just,
All right.
Now, they may have other challenges that are not related to just accessing this,
Right.
but I don't think not
This
being able to,
specifically.
yeah, this specifically, will cause that.
Okay, well then I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay.
And any further questions or discussion? No? All in favor? Aye.
Alright.
Okay, you're good to
Okay.
go on item 4.
Okay,
So let's do the review items.
so we're gonna talk about, defined calculations and additional budget requests. I hope I'm on the right spot on the agenda here. If I'm flipping back and forth. Yeah, okay. So, we're gonna talk about defined calculations and ABRs. So, if you look on the sheet that we handed out earlier,
yes.
the big long sheet, the very first item on here is defined calculations. It's considered an ABR. And we're gonna talk a little bit about what those are, so you kinda know, here are the things that, these are items that we don't really have any control over the amount that they're telling us. Basically, when the budget instructions come out, they'll say, calculate this at this rate, fill in X dollar. So that, we're gonna talk about that a little bit, and then we're gonna talk about ABRs. We wanna give you an example of one that, just one of the ones that is on this sheet, and how we've kinda costed it out. So you'll get a feel for just kinda how we look at things and how the questions we ask of staff as we're trying to put together a dollar amount. Because it's really important that we be reasonable and credible when we put a dollar beside it. So we try really hard, even though sometimes we miss the mark, we try really hard to get as much information as we can to be able to have that discussion, because, you know, not only will the Board of Education be asking us questions, but when we go over to talk with the General Assembly and Legislative Committee, they'll be asking us questions, and our budget analyst friends ask us questions as well. So, and they're really helpful because they ask really good questions so that we can say, oh, we didn't think of that, or we
Tell
did.
us more, you say these.
These are our analyst friends.
Analysts.
We happen to have one right here today.
We have one of our budget friends. This is Chuck Truesdale, and he works over at LRC. And he does similar to what we do here for you, for the LRC, for the legislators.
Okay.
So he's helping them build the budget, look at the budget, you know, ask questions, and provide them good information on which to make decisions as they move forward.
Plus, it can start with us with guidance in what the intent was in a lot of cases, we thought, so I always appreciate that.
Yeah, Chuck's a good partner for us. Okay, Charlie, do you want to talk about defined calculations?
Yes, ma'am.
And let's see, I'm looking at the clock because it's 4:27, 6, 7. So I don't know if we have
We're gonna
about
go with
10
targeting.
minutes.
So we'll just talk, go to the second page, define calculations of costs, as Robin mentioned, that are not controlled by the department. They're costs that are decided by the agencies that administer the service. So if you'll turn to the next page, page 3, there's rules that govern this. They're always included in the budget instructions. There's also a whole series of forms when we enter the budget, one for each defined calculation category. So now we'll get to what we're talking about on page 4, okay? So salary increments for all state employees are considered a defined calculation. In statute, in KRS 18A, it says, you shall provide a 5% salary increase to all state employees. We have, no state employee's got a 5% salary increment for 15 years probably. So, but we have got a 1 or 2% occasionally. So what they did last time, they changed those budget instructions to say, let's do a 1%. It's easy to calculate if you choose to do a 5, but if you do a 1%, here's a dollar amount for it. So that's what we put in our defined calculation. So 1% for every state employee's salary increase.
Unless the budget instructions come out in
Change.
July and tell us differently.
Ch-
Do
change-
something different.
Yeah.
We'll just ask Chuck now, put him on.
Yeah, yeah, Chuck, go get it.
It's gonna happen.
Back to zero again.
So the next is retirement contributions. So retirement contributions, the normal part, the regular 16 or 17% is in there. Plus the ARC is considered a retirement contribution, and then it's in defined calculations as well. Health insurance costs, if there are any increases. I talked about that a little bit. Usually health insurance are 1 or 2 or 3% increases in the most recent history. Workers' compensation, that's a number that's just given to us by the personnel cabinet based on how many claims we've had in the last X number of years. I think it's 2 or 3 years. We really don't have really high workers' comp costs, but due to the nature of our work.
Right.
Okay? If you're in the
Very-
transportation
your
cabinet.
classification.
Yeah.
And we're charged based on our
Let's
job
trip over,
classification, so we wouldn't be paying the same thing as, say,
Right.
transportation.
That's
Correct,
right.
that's exactly right.
That's
Yeah, if you got a
exactly
bunch of
right.
heavy equipment operators,
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're getting their hands smashed
Yeah.
all the time. That's exactly
Or the
right.
state police.
So just a quick question, not to get off track, but the workers' comp, do we do that through private carrier, or are we self-funding that?
I think they contract that out.
Corporations? They
I
do.
don't think we're self-funded. Chuck, do you know?
We're self-funded up to a point, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that.
Okay,
But we were
I
given a
mean,
different
Kentucky's not
rate.
very competitive
Uh-uh.
from a rate perspective, so
Yeah.
it would be more,
They give us a different number every year, changes, or every 2 years, it changes.
Yeah.
okay.
Personnel board assessments, we've got a personnel board process for appeals and people who have personnel issues, and you're assessed an amount based on the number of employees in management positions that you have. Rent and utilities, the cost, that we sit here today,
Mhm.
finance cabinet sets a rate for us, and we pay that rate. If we don't like it, we can't move out, we're still here, we pay it. Technology costs from COT, that's really a great thing for us. We have very little technology expenses from COT compared to other state agencies.
COT.
Commonwealth Office of Technology, thank you,
Okay.
sorry.
So they're the centralized technology center
Mhm.
for the Commonwealth, of course. We are a little different because we have our own network,
So we
Kentucky
use them
Education
for
Network.
everything?
We use them for some things, but not a lot,
Yeah.
not like other state agencies do.
Is our allocation based on our limited use?
Yes, sir.
Mhm. Yes, it is.
It's a fraction of what other
Yeah.
agencies have to
Uh-huh.
pay. We're on the same network as school districts
Yeah.
and state governments on their own. Okay?
Does the state own this building though, I assume, when you're in the finance department,
lease to own?
provides the calculator?
It's sort of like a lease to
Okay.
own.
So it's a capitalized lease and at this
Mhm.
point, so it's
Mhm.
nice and expensive. Okay.
But it's clean.
Yeah, that's right.
Motor pool, we have a cost associated when you rent a car. You pay X number of cents per mile or whatever that may be.
We don't have any vehicles of our own.
We have about 30, like about 10 or 12 of those are at each KSB and KSD. They each have a small fleet of vehicles. And then
But they're
also-
really just agency assigned,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So we still pay for those too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then we have, ATCs.
Yeah,
Some of our
ATCs
ATCs have pickup
I wondered
trucks
about
Yeah.
to do some things.
Right.
It's not very big cost for
No,
us.
it's not.
Department-wide. Facility security, we pay an amount for the guards that are sitting downstairs in front, and we also have drive-by security that comes on nights and weekends. We have, and it's whatever they say. It's not really that bad for that. It's the rate that they charge us, fair amount for what they provide. And governmental servicing, that's a training process for state employees, and that's an amount that's set based on the number of managers you have in your department. So they offered,
Training classes.
just every general
Really
management
scheduled,
training.
mandatory type training routines that they have.
Some of them are, and some of them are more elective,
Okay.
yeah.
So those are the kind of things. So the next page gives you just a couple examples of how much money those cost. So salary and fringe at 1% in our last FY19 defined calculation was 4.5 million. rent, security, and, rent, utility, security, and insurance was 2.3 million. Chris and E-Mart, that's the cost that they charge us to use the COT rates, was 300,000. You know, that sounds like a lot, but as much as we have, that's not that much. And then workers' compensation was 241
That's
for
for
our
how
whole
many?
department,
How many employees?
1,100.
That's pretty cheap.
Yes,
That is.
That's really cheap.
yeah.
1,100?
In the, that are on KDE's workers' comp.
So we
But
had,
there's
So
588
remember-
in this building,
so
whoever
remember-
runs the ATCs?
Yeah, remember, we have
There you go.
about 600
Perfect.
employees at the 53 area technology centers.
Okay. Okay.
the next is, I buzzed over this in our full board meeting. Growth requests are really just requests for something that you're currently doing that has some kind of inflationary increase associated with it. New or expanded requests, you know, new is new, exactly what it thinks. Expanded is, hey, we're doing this for this group of people now. We want to enlarge the group of people we're doing the same thing for. Like if we change the preschool rate from 160% of poverty to 185 or
Right.
200, that would be an expansion example.
Are there any new on this wish list?
There's a few, yes ma'am. And then fund source replacement's interesting. A good example is, until I think FY16, we had like $700,000 grant from the federal government for AP testing. That dollar was cut out of the federal budget, and we found a way in the department, we took up some of our assessment money, and we're paying for that. So we always ask, we've historically asked for money to pay for advanced placement testing, because it's a statutory requirement. And so we're replacing a lost source of federal funds. And it's just a checkbox, but I think that the intent is there to say, hey, at some point, either growth, growth projects in general have more importance over fund source replacement or vice versa. For us, it's really about what the work is.
So at what point, just to, real quick, for example, in the ACT test for 10th graders, right? There's been no funding from the legislature to pay for this, but statutorily, we are required to do it, correct? So, like, whose responsibility is to bridge that gap? Like, why is
Yeah, what are the
statutorily required
consequences
if
of
we can't
not
pay for
doing
it?
it? What are the consequences?
So who's gonna come after us if we break the
Right.
law?
So that's one of the dozen, right,
Right,
Yeah,
and that's the
Check
kind of
number.
process I wanna understand.
that we're required to do, that we're not funded for. And personally, I believe in that. They knew it. They knew they weren't funding it. That's what I believe. And that if they thought they may come back and fix it at a later date. That's what I think.
So it needs to get cleaned up if we're never gonna fund it. Take it out.
Yeah, yeah, we either need to take it out or we need to have enough money to do it.
Right.
But what are
That's absolutely
consequences
right.
for the department when you are statutorily required and then you don't comply?
Right.
Well, sometimes they will invite you to come over and talk in front of a legislative body to explain that.
Good.
And we have been over in front of the legislative body and said,
You didn't
we
give
don't
us-
have enough money to do ACT for the 10th grade. We just want you to know that we're not gonna do that. And we didn't do it.
Well, that's kind of funny. Okay, they tell you to do it and they don't give you money and you say, well, we're not doing it, and they go, okay. So what's the point of that exercise? Maybe,
They talk
what is
about-
it, just make them feel good that they told you it has to be done?
I don't know.
And that is so weird, okay.
I think you can't squeeze blood out of the turnip.
So is
So Charlie, if you'll pass out the next bit of information, we just wanted to share with you kind of what, we just picked one off of here so you could see the exercise that we go through with department staff when we're asking them to submit information to us for a possible ABR. So this is for the ATC operating.
yes,
We don't have enough money to operate our ATCs the right way. And this is really just to kind of take care of what we need right now. You know, the commissioner is very interested, and rightfully so, in looking at how we fund career and tech ed, including ATCs and the locally operated. So this doesn't go into any of that. This is just trying to take care of what we have now. So we ask each program office, if they have an idea, they fill out the front page. And then I just wanted to show you on the back of this, kind of the level of detail.
Oh, that's good.
When we want to see, okay, you came up with this number of 3.2 million in fiscal year 20. Tell us, I mean, break it down into smaller chunks. So, David Horstman in his office, they did a real good job in trying to break this down to explain to us why we needed this additional money.
And is this for the 53 ATCs?
This is for the 53 ATCs.
And so you guys would distribute that to them, if you got this funding, you would allocate it?
Yes. So that's just one. That one's a little further along. And when you look at the ABRs that are on here, just across the board, some of them are are less refined because they haven't spent as much time digging into it. You know, conceptually, we really want to understand, is this a direction that we need to be going in before we spend a lot of work? But this was one that was, you know, manageable to just dig down into now and show us the details. So, but that's what we would do once you all have more conversation about the ABRs you're interested in. And we'll even do that continuing now between August, up until August. We will start refining these numbers and really saying what they are.
So we include all of these ABRs and with.
And then we'll
our
narrow.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we submit it off and then it'll get hacked and
And then
decide
they
what we do
pray.
with it.
No,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, but we're gonna enjoy the work. aren't
We are.
All
We're
right.
gonna enjoy the work.
We can
So-
drink.
This is great.
and the other
Thank
thing-
you for this.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would just share with you is, you know, I know there's, you know, understandably a level of frustration about this whole process. But if there's something that the board is interested in from a funding perspective, then it can be an ABR all on its own that we've never done. I mean, we have a category called new. It's something that has not happened before. So don't just think that these are the only things. And of course, we've talked to everyone across the department and others, and this is what they say. But I will be frank with you, this is just to kind of do what we're doing. I mean, because you'll see,
Maintenance.
you will see, there's lots of statutory references in here and pieces in here. You'll see that we've been told to do something, we don't have any money to do it, or we don't have enough.
Yeah.
And so this is just, and from an operating perspective, I'll put a plug in for KSB and KSD and the ATCs. I mean, we don't have enough to operate what we have right now, so.
Is this our 30-second warning, Commissioner?
No,
Well, we're winding down.
That was 5 minutes ago.
They'll-
Whatever.
they'll-
5 minutes is good for us,
They'll
man.
give us a hard time, so.
So take this and look at it, of
Yeah.
course, and
Well,
of course.
But
we
that,
can
I think
answer
that's what I was
questions.
getting at when, not be argumentative with the fact that, of course we want reform, of course we want to push legislators. My whole point is there are some things within this process that we cannot impact, so let's find the things that we can,
Right.
right? I mean, that's the stuff we have to focus on, and
Like,
And they may still
like
say no,
ATCs,
but-
for instance.
exactly, we all know that we can't do what they told us to do as is grossly.
Right.
Yeah. So this
Okay.
was just a review item to give you a little more
Yeah,
insight
that's super
about
helpful.
defined calculations and ABRs.
So this is good input for us if Chairman Heiner had suggested that we have a special meeting and that we could devote some conversation to this. So knowing what you just said is helpful. And if we do decide to call that meeting, I would encourage you saying, I mean, we can, of course, but saying that to the whole board.
And I think, like I said, it's just a time that we just have to set aside
Right,
and decide how it is we want to do this, and make you guys can figure it out. I mean,
right. So before they harass us to adjourn this meeting, is the portions of it that you need to have covered, are they covered? Okay. So I just have a couple quick questions, some of them in the emails I've been sending in, unless you would prefer I not use up time here for that.
I don't know how close we are in time for the chairs or position.
Like, some of them are maybe easily answered. Bonding was one, like how that is treated on the Excel spreadsheets on the website. Because we keep finding them in other, and is
So-
bonding, I mean, bonding is not a source of revenue.
So I think it might be helpful if we could actually see exactly what you're talking about, like if, and
Screenshot it.
either we do, we've done a phone call, or we could even do another, a meeting, or,
Okay.
it's really helpful, since we've sent so much information to you.
Right.
I'm just a little worried that I won't be talking about the same thing that you're
Yeah, that
talking
we're
with,
talking about.
yeah, in the
So-
boxes, so.
Okay.
But we're happy to do that.
Okay, okay, then. Hang on here. So, yeah, well, okay, so it isn't clear, because I thought we had sent you a section of the Excel spreadsheet to show you where it was that we were
And we
talking.
responded to that.
Right. So it's not easy then to just answer the question if bond money is considered in revenue?
No, I think if you're referring to, are you referring to the big, long spreadsheet that's on our website?
Yes.
Correct, okay, it says other revenue. I think the bonds are considering a financing source, but that other revenue column is sort of the dumping ground for all this outside of state, local,
So
federal.
it's still liability on our
other.
books.
Right,
I mean,
and that spreadsheet was, the format, I should say, was inherited from 1989, 90, and it's very, very slow to change. It's not a format that we've liked, but
Can
we
we
try to
change
keep it
it?
the same. We can do those spreadsheets in
Yeah.
a million different ways.
Well, it's so unintuitive, it is unclear.
It
For
is.
even people who do work in this
Yeah,
field.
and there's not really a legend to tell you, well, what's in this column, what's in that column, and
Right.
we
It's the
we
fun
understand
game, I
that.
guess.
Yeah, it's part of
No.
guesswork,
What
trust
falls in
me.
here? Every finance person.
but
wants
we
to
are
know.
Charlie will,
certainly.
he knows that we, I mean.
Yeah, we're certainly happy to take and kind of recreate that wheel and, add some stuff to it that if this column is what you want, well, this is what's in this column and things
Well,
like
could
that.
we reconsider a different way of laying out even more than that? I mean, how much leeway do we have for reworking the information as you now work it on the website?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, we're not gonna be able to reinvent our accounting system. I mean,
No,
that's not
I don't
gonna,
know that it's
that's
accounting
not,
system.
that's not a good use of our time.
No, I
But
don't
we
think I
can,
mean
we
that.
can, but we can formulate a report or do a spreadsheet differently.
Yes,
That's absolutely
I think that's
possible.
where we're hanging up.
That's
Well,
absolutely
But I
possible.
think you'd want to, Kathy, I realize you don't have your purposes and intent, but there are a whole lot of other groups out there that also use these spreadsheets. So
Who, like who, for example?
researchers.
Well, the school districts
School
compare
districts.
themselves to other districts using that same spreadsheet. And I think that's the original intent and why it was published many years ago, was so school districts could compare themselves.
So that's not to say we couldn't create something different
Yeah.
for you.
Okay,
I mean, we can do that.
okay.
We just need to sit down and understand where the confusion is and then try to make it clearer.
Okay, so
We can
maybe
do
that
that.
can be the way, where we start with the
Yeah.
next phone call.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah, we can do that.
okay.
All right, we're gonna be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Generally, okay, this is, maybe we're finally homing in on the pension question.
Uh-huh.
There was a special allocation by the,
General Assembly?
that went directly
Mhm.
into the Kentucky retirement system.
Mhm.
But normally, that doesn't happen that way, right? Money that is for pensions normally comes
Mhm.
through here.
Yeah, and that still happens. I mean, we still get money for pensions in the department's budget. But because of the pension crisis and trying to make up, they're trying to make up the
The
slide.
underfunding for.
The underfunding of it, they're trying to make it up. So that's why they sent a big chunk directly to the retirement systems too.
So that is not gonna happen anymore, right?
No,
It could?
I hope it does.
Yeah, I hope it does too.
There's a big shortfall.
Yeah.
Why do they, why do they
I hope
have
it does.
to-
Oh, you're saying, why wouldn't they go ahead and put that in our budget?
Why wouldn't they put it in
Okay.
your budget?
That's just a policy decision,
Yeah.
General Assembly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It'd be easier to
Clear
track, wouldn't it?
legislatures.
It'd be easier to track if it was all in one
Well,
place.
the
is
thing
your
is
point,
that-
Well, I
right?
think we
One of
need to
the-
be able to track it, Robin. It's just
One
kind
of the
of,
problems is that you get no credit for that for education spending. It's never included in the totals
well,
for
that, but
education spending.
they are helping
and it
me
needs to be.
that's a
That's what
spreadsheet we want written differently.
Yeah.
That is one example.
Uh-huh.
That makes no sense to somebody who's trying to look at the numbers
Of what we actually spend.
of what we actually spend. So, okay.
And it's a different discussion too with what is budgeted and what is spent,
Right.
all right? And we sometimes get those intertwined, but they are two very different things, what is budgeted and what is spent. Because there's still dollars that come directly to a school district that never come to us.
Right.
It's not anywhere in our budget, it's not anywhere in the Commonwealth's budget.
But it should show up on the school report card,
It would
right?
show in their AFR,
AFR?
their annual financial report.
But pensions would not, the special pension allocation would not show up there. That doesn't come with the
But
district.
that's gonna affect every
Yeah.
agency in state government.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
all employees.
It's
not just
everybody.
you.
Okay. All right, well, I think I'm out of time. I have one.
You're gonna get us all tardy.
I know.
I know, we're all getting
Look,
in trouble.
I set
True,
up
it's
a
it.
precedent. I do not want to violate that precedent now. We are gonna be tardy every
Every
time.
time.
Oh.
Well, it
I
makes
have a
our,
reputation to uphold.
it makes our
Yeah.
goal sensitive, folks a little antsy.
I think you need a motion to adjourn if you're gonna
Oh,
adjourn.
here comes
So
Joe.
moved. We're done.
We're
Okay,
done.
we have a motion. Do you
I
want to
knew,
have
I
a
knew,
motion?
I knew.
Move we adjourn.
Do you have a second?
I second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
It was nice
It's
to
good to see all of y'all. Come back.
Oh, you're welcome.